Aloha, everyone, in another level living land. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Freedom Fridays. So happy that you're here because we're in for another amazing treat. We have our special friend and guest, Luke Benoit, coming back to us for a third time as we delve deep on this so needed and important topic on overcoming addictive relationships. So before we get into it and we give him this warm welcome, let me remind you about why we're here. The purpose of this show is to support you as the entrepreneur in achieving success in business and life harmony, because it really is about creating peace on all sides. We never want to get so busy making a living that we forget to make a life. And it is possible to work smarter, not harder, create time, money, and emotional freedom, stress less, strengthen our relationships, and lead with much more energy, ease, and momentum. And one of the beauties of why we continue to have Luke come back is because it literally is the posture of our heart space and our personal relationships that also make or break our success in business. A lot of times there can be things that are happening in our personal life that can get in the way of our professional life. And again, it really is possible to create peace on all sides. So give our amazing guest, Luke, another warm welcome and aloha, and in the chat, tell them hello. And Luke, we're just so happy that you're here with us again today.
It's good to be here again. I love to talk about these topics.
Yes. Me too. I love to hear about it. One of the things that I don't think a lot of people recognize is that these relationships are common. I had a very, very, very nice long stream of addictive relationships, and I learned to be able to overcome them with the use of this technique. And it's really about the hope and what's possible on the other side. Our life can be chaotic. Our relationships and interactions can be chaotic. They can become toxic, and it is possible to make them healthy. And so that's why we're here, because the world needs to know this. So Luke, tell us, as you were thinking about the show, what kind of came to you today? Like, what's maybe the biggest thing on your heart to be able to share with us today about this?
Well, you told me that what you wanted to talk about this time was kind of like moving out of addictive relationships.
Yes.
And that's a complicated process. It actually starts, like most addictions, when the relationship addiction is still in process. So in terms of addiction theory, I think of Terry Gorski and the pre-contemplative stage, where we know things are not right. We know we want to do things about it. We're afraid about what the other person is going to do, and we're not really ready to do anything yet until there is some kind of an inciting incident that moves us forward into the actual withdrawal. Withdrawal is a very real thing with addictive relationships. It's much harder for the partner that we're going to call the needy or love addicted partner to go through the withdrawal than it is for the avoidant. The avoidant is happy now. They don't have to deal with anybody. They get to go their own way and nobody's bothering them. And that's what they wanted in the first place. So they may get desperate and run back later, but that love addict is there in the pain. And they're having to deal with, really, I kind of think like the cycle of the addicted relationship. And that was originally identified by Patrick Carnes in his work on sex addiction. And then later, everybody realized that this model, this kind of circle, this cycle that he delineated applied to all the addictions, and it breaks down into 4 parts. It's, what am I obsessing about? What is my denial? What's my ritual? What's my actual use? And then what is the pain and shame that comes afterwards? Okay. The way to intervene on this cycle is before the use happens breaking up the ritual. Before I go to pick up that phone one more time and beg you to come back to me, I need all those actions leading up to that to be very familiar to me, and I need to break that chain all the way down. Okay. Now, if we have somebody breaking those actions in the chain, but then down here towards the use end, they pick up and start doing the actions, automatically the automatic pilot will take over and they will use. They will pick up that phone, they will beg, they will try to get that person back, and then they'll just be in pain and anxiety. So sustaining that withdrawal requires a lot of support around this person. It's a time to reach out for help, for people who love you, for people in a 12-step program who can be there for you, to help carry you when you can't carry yourself. And if you can stay in that spot long enough, that withdrawal spot, eventually you're going to come out of it. The magical qualities that that person had are not going to be looking so magical anymore. You're going to be on the other side and you're going to be able to move forward in your life. Eventually, with new relationships, but first, there's usually a quiet period where we need to rest, get to know ourselves again, be peaceful before we kind of jump in to another potential insanity with someone else. That's it. So we have to learn how to evaluate someone. And what I find is the very best method to evaluate someone is using Barbara DeAngelis's book, Are You the One for Me? Now, she doesn't impress me very much, I have to say, wherever she's out there hearing this, I'm sorry, but this book is a little gem of brilliance. And it tells you who to avoid. What are the time bombs that are going to go off later in the relationship? What are the unworkable situations that we have to look for in the beginning? And in the end of the book, there's a wonderful kind of like test where you identify all the most important traits of the person that you're looking for. I think there's 20 different sections thematically, like physical, communication, financial, work, all these different sections, and you're going to identify what you want. And now you have this measure, and when you meet somebody, you're going to measure them up against your test. And you're going to measure who you were just with up against your test and other people you've been with. And you're going to kind of find out you're not as choosy and careful as you could be, you know? And doing this test is really, really brilliant. As you do the test and you encounter someone, you find out, oh, wait, I left these items off the test and I need to add them in. That's what this person showed me. And I'm getting really clear now about what I'm looking for, really thoughtful about that process so that I can have a much better chance of connecting with a really compatible mate. So with this test, she has you score it. It's all in the book in the back. You kind of come up with a composite score, 85% or less. She says, just throw it back. It's too hard to try to get somebody to be how you want them to be. It's easier to find somebody who's already like what you want your person to be.
So there's two things that come to mind as we're
Tell
talking
me,
about this.
tell me. I threw a lot of material at you
I
right
know that was really good. I mean, it was
there. It's
really,
really
really
good.
good. So for those who are listening, check out these books because there's this one, it's kind of like twofold. There's this one where the situation of how do you move forward after an addictive relationship, like you're already out of it and you're like going through the process. And then there's another part that I want us to talk about is like, okay, you're in it and you're pretty much recognizing that there's a need for transformation and how to be able to do that part. Like we talked a little bit about that before, but focusing on this one here, I thought it was really great because I shared with my students yesterday that it's your beliefs and your values that create a lot of time your reality. So it's almost like this thing about if we spot it, we got it. And then recognizing, how to be able to elevate out of of that after the pain, so you get to this point where, okay, you're let go. I remember in your video, it's almost like, okay, it's like the energy is going back to the chaser, right? So like, okay, they're recognizing this is what the pattern is, and then they're focusing on their what their next steps are, right? So what's really cool about what you highlighted is that part about understanding a lot of it has to do with like your personality. What are your desires? What are your boundaries? What are your needs? What are the things that are important to you? And I think that's one of the things that's crucial even for both aspects, whether there's a total derailment and going a different way, or whether they're still kind of in the thick of it, where it's like this understanding what you need and where you are and what's going on, and letting that be something that is congruent and something that is expressed. It's so interesting how a lot of times we think that someone should think exactly the way we do, yet everybody's mind is totally different. Everybody's experiences are totally different. And I did hear one time somebody said, if you ended up having someone who's just like you, you'll end up being quite bored. So a lot of times it's the opposites of the things that kind of bring the challenges, the growth. But I think how we navigate those things makes all the difference. But the good things that you mentioned, like the resources of checking out this book, I was talking with a couple people last week, and they were sharing with me about their situations and how everybody externally would say, just let it go. Right. And then there's this pull part. So it's kind of like you can see where part of it is the addiction part of it is the other part. And then I said, well, when you change, everything changes. It becomes clear on what the way forward is. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And what it makes me think of too is a piece of this that I didn't mention before.
Tell me.
We start looking at these potential candidates, right? But before we can do that, we need to start doing an exhaustive look and inventory of ourselves. What happened last time that didn't work? What were my expectations? What were the assumptions that I had? How was I assuming that they were going to show up the way I wanted them to show up and the way I would show up, when that's a different person over there. They may have a different grid that just doesn't fit with mine. And so much of that solution comes in knowing me, knowing my pains, knowing my weaknesses, knowing my beliefs, and heading them off at the pass when that new person comes along. Okay. For me, I have this little crazy pattern that I'm not proud of, but how it works is, I can meet someone new and then suddenly I sent them 10 texts in a row, and overwhelm them totally and not think, that's not what they were looking for. They were looking for a little of this, a little bit of this. But, it comes out of me. Sometimes it's like an avalanche, I need to learn to hold back, to be quiet, to do. I had an old therapist who used to say, right now, you need to go radio silence, is what she would say. In other words, like, shut your damn mouth and sit still and wait long enough for them to respond. And then I'd be like, well, what if they don't respond? Well, if they don't respond, they weren't the one. So you just go radio silence and stay there. And that was some good advice.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I've realized that there is, as we're talking about this, there's such a divine purpose of all relationships, past, present, and future. There's so many amazing lessons and growth. And I think what all of them do, even as we chunk up big picture, is that they lead us to being able to step into more of who we are.
Yeah.
And being able to own that and being able to be that place with aloha, with unconditional love, in spite of the differences, in spite of what has happened. I think also it leads us to be able to learn how to better forgive, ourselves and other people. Like, we can be the hardest on ourselves than we can be on other people sometimes.
You are talking the Course in Miracles right there.
Okay.
The Course in Miracles, the mechanism for every situation is forgiveness. And the way they think about it is, when we meet somebody, we connect up, and now we are each other's teachers. When we get the lesson, we'll detach and move forward. Sometimes we meet somebody who's a lifelong teacher, because we have so much to teach each other, and it will continue. Often, like a parent is a lifelong teacher that way. Marianne Williamson, I think she's done some kind of crazy things in the last few years. She had a book where she told everybody out there to just stop taking their medication, stop taking their psych medication, like, broadly.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy and irresponsible.
It's almost scary, because you come off of that stuff, you don't know what's going to happen.
And a shame, because she's so brilliant, and her first book is called A Return to Love. And that's the decoding of the Course in Miracles. And she does such a wonderful job with that. The insights on relationships are so terrific. I must have read that book 11 times. It literally 11 times. Yeah.
Okay, that's so cool. So you've mentioned so many books for people to be able to start delving into. And everything, again, in every one of these, you're going to learn more about yourself, more about the situation, more about the partners, past, present, or future. So I think that is something that's really profound. Because one of the things I usually also see is that people will leave one relationship and immediately get into a next one. Or
the trapeze. That's the trapeze.
Yeah.
We go from one to the next. Yeah.
Right. And that's so chaotic. Or even they'll start that process while they're still in the middle of one.
Yeah.
And it's almost
what happens to the kids? What happens to the kids in the middle of all that is a good question. Because nobody's paying attention appropriately to the kids during all this drama. So the kids are having to raise themselves.
And I can imagine and seeing, as we think about what's going on in the world, how is that making an impact to them? Because now the internet is raising them. The YouTube is raising them. They see all this stuff. We have so many we've had about 164 mass shootings since the beginning of this year, and a majority of the people are under 40.
It's just beyond comprehension.
It
really is.
is. It is. So, well, and I guess maybe from your perspective, what are some of the ways to be able to heal that? Like, okay, so there's been this traumatic situation, there's been this difficulty. How do we help even the children?
Okay. So what we're talking about is trauma, right? I mean, that's it.
Right.
And there are several ways to heal trauma that are very good. EMDR is a fantastic treatment for trauma. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And that name really has very little to do with how it works and what it does. It basically puts the person into a trance state, a dream state, and using something called bilateral stimulation, either getting the client to move their eyes back and forth or tapping them on their legs, right, left, that will bring them into that trance. And then we guide them through the unpleasant memories so that that trauma can be discharged. This is an incredibly effective remedy. The other thing, what I do with people who are dealing with trauma and relationship trauma, we're going to do tapping. And we're going to do, a modified version of tapping called faster EFT tapping. And it's going to involve a lot of NLP in the process. And the tapping is very simple. It's very misunderstood. Some people think you can tap on yourself and it's just as good. I don't really think so. I think having someone guide you through it is more successful. But essentially, you think about the upsetting material and then you tap and you talk on it. So if we were together, I would tap on you. You're going to first give me a bunch of words or a description of the trauma. I'm going to write it on the board. I'm going to sit down with you. We're going to get ready to tap. Okay. And you're going to kind of close your eyes. I'm going to tap on you. I let it go. It's okay to let it go. It's safe to let it go. I can completely release and let it go. Peace. Okay. That's the building block right there. We'll end up doing versions of that for about 45 minutes. All the words you gave me that I wrote on the board, in this process, I'm going to give them back to you. When I tap on you, you will repeat what I say. So as we tap, I'm giving you your words. You're repeating your own words while we're tapping, and that creates an incredible cathartic experience.
So,
it is wonderful. I'm in love with this modality.
Oh, that's great. Because my question I was thinking about, especially for our audience, what happens if we don't let go of our trauma?
You repeat your old behaviors. If you don't let go of the trauma, the next one coming down the line is going to be a new version of that person you had last time with a different face and different clothes and the exact same patterns and energy. And you're going to do it again and again until you get it right. That's how it works.
So good and important. I would say, one of the things I would usually say is, if we don't heal what hurt us, we're going to bleed all over the people that don't deserve it.
That's absolutely right.
And then that's not good for anyone, because then the trauma just gets manifested out and it becomes bigger. So for those of you who are listening, this is, like I said, we talk about this topic because It is something that's so needed. I mean, Luke and I we have a good personal relationship and connection with this topic individually and as well as the people that we work with. And we know that it's possible to totally be able to overcome these things. Before we go, I do want to talk about the other side, right? So the other side of how to move forward after trauma in like a more lifelong relationship. Like say, for instance, it's a marriage and it's like, okay, I want to do it, but I want to be able to move forward. We talked about it before. Can you touch on that part?
Say a little bit more about that. I think I understand you, but help me get clearer.
So one of the things I usually hear is that, okay, I'm married and I made this commitment, this lifelong commitment, and we are in an addictive relationship pattern that we want to be able to change. We don't necessarily know how. There's difficulties on both sides. And I remember we talked about before where there's this heartbreak and how to be able to heal the heart wounds, like you meet together and then you meet individually and we start healing from those things. Um,
I think
so
you're right. It's meet together, meet individually. Okay. There has to be a strong commitment on the part of both sides, both parties, to make this work.
mm,
That can be difficult, especially with the more avoidant partner. It's easier for them to just walk away.
mm.
That's their program, is to get them to they just walk away. So how are we going to get them to stay? That is going to be the big job of the coach and the clinician, to get them to stay, look at their own stuff, heal their own trauma, learn how to communicate moderately so that they can connect with the other partner. The other partner is not dealing with wanting to leave necessarily, but they're in so much pain and they're experiencing recurrent pain every time their partner, this avoidant partner, goes away. It triggers them. It's usually triggering their childhood abandonment issues, their codependency. That is the stuff that really gets to them, you know. If
So
we
when
can
there's
get them,
resolution of all of that,
it's
when there's
all a lot of individual trauma work
nice.
come together. We try to do communication skills, teaching. We try to get facilitated communication. And out of that is going to come more clarity, more targets about what we need to work on with the trauma. We're going to go separate, work on the trauma for both of these people, and they're both going to have to stay committed to it. And then that's the process.
I love it. I love it. So you see here, we've covered both sides. You know, one of the things I remember there was this lady, I can't remember her name, and I think her name was Sharon something. And she wrote this book, Do I Stay or Do I Go? And they were like,
Oh,
what
wow.
well, there's all these, what if there's other options, right? And so we've given you several options here. First of all, clarity on what you need, what you desire, where is, healing, a lot of healing is required of what has been, right? Healing the past to be able to be more in the present and create a bigger vision for the future. It requires commitment on both sides. But the biggest thing is we can't control other people. We can only control how we respond to them. So a lot of our change starts with us and then goes from there. I think about the story of the man who tried to save the whole world. So a lot of us, who especially this applies to, we have a big heart. There's this big love, this big passion for so much of what's happening in the world. So there was this man, Luke, who went off to try to save the world. And he got frustrated because the world wasn't changing. And then he was like, well, if only I could change my community. and he got frustrated because the community wasn't changing. And then he was like, if only I could change my family. And he got frustrated that the family wasn't changing. And he recognized that it wasn't until he was on his deathbed that he realized, if I had just changed, then everything else would have changed around me. And so it's just so powerful and profound, like these life lessons that we learn. And it's not necessarily about holding on to hope. It's like becoming the hope and the change that you wish to see. And then you can be able to stand in your power congruent to be able to powerfully express what is needed for the way forward, whatever that might be. Oh, Luke, this was so good. Do you have a big takeaway that you want to be able to share with us? That would be awesome.
I guess the real takeaway doesn't sound that hopeful, but it is.
Okay, we're here.
The big takeaway is you can succeed with this. It can happen, but it's going to take a lot of commitment and hard work. But you can do it. It's doable if you're willing to put in the energy. It will happen.
All about the energy. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Luke, tell us again how we can find you so they know where to get a hold of you.
Oh, the easiest way to find me is to go to my website, which is www.lukebenoit.com. That's LUKEBENOIT.com. I'm on Facebook. My Facebook is just Luke Benoit. You can even reach me by phone, 562 area code 618-3099. I'm everywhere.
Yay! We're so happy that you're here and everywhere. And if you haven't had a chance to check out, like I said, definitely go and check out Luke's Facebook or website, because it has the link to his YouTube channel where he has some amazing videos talking even more about this topic. If you're in any of these situations, it's like you don't have to go the battle alone. You can totally have support. We are here for you. Reach out to Luke. He's an expert in this, and he knows how to be able to help you move forward, whatever that might be. And Luke, we're just so grateful for you blessing our stage and having your presence here with us today. This was incredible. Once again,
I just love coming to sit with you, and I hope we keep doing this because it's really good.
Yes, it is. Well, we'll see you again next quarter. So y'all be on the lookout again for Luke coming back within the next 3 months. And everyone else out there in Another Level Living Land, thanks so much for listening in, and have an amazing Freedom Friday and an awesome weekend. Peace.